Greetings, gumshoes, and welcome back to another episode of Silver Screen Sleuth. My name is Emily Edwards. I am the author of the Girl Friday Mysteries, starting with Viviana Valentine Gets Her Man, and friend and host to you all, hopefully. We have a wonderful guest today. I am tripping over my words because I'm so excited to chat with him. Today, my guest is Danny Cherry Jr., the author of The Pike Boys and owner of Big Easy Press. Like, so accomplished, and you're like so much younger than me, and I'm just like, oh my God, you're so cool. Danny, how the hell are you today?
I'm doing very wonderful. Thank you for so much for asking. I'm excited to be here.
Yay, hooray. Like, I always hope I don't drag someone in kicking and screaming, because usually when I ask someone, I'm like, you're not allowed to say no, you just have to choose a movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie I would love to talk about. So
I'm so excited because we already chatted with Shelley Cubits about Knives Out, and that was a really good conversation. So we're going to follow up with chatting with you about its sequel, The Glass Onion. And, I think we all have sort of mixed feelings about this movie because it came out essentially during lockdown, during the pandemic. Yeah. And so, like, when you saw that Knives Out was getting a sequel, were you excited? Were you like,
I don't know. I'm always like split on sequels because like I always feel like that was the word I'm looking for, sophomore slump. And I felt like the Knives Out movie was such a great movie. So there was this part of me that was like, don't do this to this film. Like, why are you doing this? But I was actually pleased with Glass Onion, and I've recently rewatched it in preparation, and it's a lot better than I remember it. Like, it was good. It was a good rewatch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I found the same way. I remember watching it right off the bat, and I was just kind of like, that's novel, and then rewatching it for the show, it really drove home that it's a really very, very well crafted, sleuth movie. Now, my question for you is, I apologize, I've not yet read your book, but is it the same sort of like sleuthy concept, or is it a different crime fiction altogether?
It's a different type of crime fiction. I would compare it more to like Sopranos, Peaky Blinders, Boardwalk Empire, that type of stuff. That's like those shows. I was about to be redundant, but yeah.
That's so interesting. So what made you choose Glass Onion over something that was maybe a little bit more geared towards organized crime or crime families?
I just really enjoy a good mystery. Like, even though I knew it was going to happen at the end, it was still very enjoyable to watch. And I also, earlier this year, went on a binge fest of Agatha Christie's books. I think I got through 12 of them. She wrote so much stuff. Like, yeah. So whenever I thought of a movie, I was like, okay, I'm going to watch something that gives me that vibe of an Agatha Christie book.
Totally. What's your favorite Aggie novel?
Crap. It's the one where, I was about to spoil it.
They're 100 years old. It's fine.
Yeah, that is true. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I believe it's called. I think I'm not the title, but
the first time I read that one, it pissed me off so badly.
One thing I like about her writing is you always feel like you know where things are going. You're like, okay, that person is obviously the murderer. And then at the end, it's like, holy shit, okay, I was wrong. She did it again.
Yeah, she gets me. I remember the first Agatha Christie novel that I read was And Then There Were None. And I read that in middle school. And that's one where they're all on the island and you have to try to figure out who's murdering people in sequence and why. And it was so gripping to me because it was probably the first adult mystery I ever read where it was like wasn't specifically written for a child audience. And that was definitely when I was like, oh, this is my genre. Like this is, what I need to focus on. And I was wondering, what was your journey to becoming a writer? Why did you write a crime fiction novel?
So my journey actually started when I was a kid. Like ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a writer. Like that's something like if you talk to my uncle, he brings that up a good bit. He's like, you remember you wanted to be a comic book writer? Yeah, I wanted to be a comic book writer at first. Then I get to college and I started looking up like what that entails. And it's like winning the lottery. Like I have a better chance playing the lottery than becoming a comic book writer. And then I was like, okay, I can go indie. Like people go indie all the time. Like the guy from The Walking Dead started off as an indie was what I'm looking for, writer. But then I realized how much it costs to get an artist. And I was like, you know what? Prose is cheaper. So then that's just honestly like, don't get me wrong, I always liked prose books, but I was like, okay, I feel like I can write a comic book. Holy shit, this costs a lot of money. I'm going to teach myself how to write prose. And then I went to my school library and it had this like ancient book about the art of writing fiction. I don't even remember the name of it. And then I read it and I just fell in love. Like, I was like, okay, this is how this is done. It was almost like I was learning the secret to a magic trick. And that's when I realized there is like not a formula to writing, but like, the basic, like first act, like the what's what I'm looking for, the hero's journey. And then once you learn that, you can kind of put your own spin on it.
Exactly. No, that's so cool. And you also run a program for young writers, don't you?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit. It's an all age invite. Well, okay, we meet at breweries and bars and stuff like that. So maybe, depending on where we're at, you probably can't get in if you're under 21. But we're open to everyone. And essentially, we put on about, I think at this point, 6 events a month. We started at like doing 2. And we have writing groups where we just meet up and, as per the name, we write together. But we also have industry panels, and we also do a reading series, and we do too much, one might say.
No, there's no such thing as too much, especially, it is so daunting to think about writing and, to think about how you're going to break into the industry, how you're going to learn what to do. We all have different access to like writing courses and things like that, that it can be very, very, very overwhelming when you decide that like you have a story you want to tell, and how do you even go about doing that? And there's this belief right now, because self-publishing or independent publishing has gotten to be such a significant portion of the industry, that like air quotes anybody can do it. And that's a really frankly insulting thing
Yeah.
to believe, because it really does take practice and skill, and it's just the general know-how of where to start. It is a very skilled trade, and a lot of people truly believe, especially in the era of AI, that like all you need is the idea and all you can do is, and then all of a sudden magically an 80,000 word book is going to show up, or a 3-picture deal like Rian Johnson with his Knives Out series. And it's like, no, that doesn't happen for anybody, and it really does take a phenomenal amount of work to get even like one book done and readable.
Yeah, my first book I did self-publish because that was like a dream of mine to just get my work out there because I didn't want to
Mhm.
like wait on anyone's permission to start publishing. And I knew it was a good book. I had so many beta readers, and all but one did not like it very much. He was very critical of it. So that almost kind of like pushed me off that path. But then I was like, you know what, fuck this. Like, it's a good book. I mean, if however many people out of this many people like it can't be a bad book. And then I did try to query it for like a couple months, and then that's when I was like, "Oh, this sucks. This."
It sucks. It's funny because Rian Johnson, we think about him and his writer directorial like arc is, he did the Star Wars movie that I loved and all the Star Wars fanboys hated, and now they're like wildly critical of him. And a lot of people don't know that his first movie outside of film school was just this neo noir movie called Brick. It took him ages to get that made. And I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's an absolutely brilliant, like noir sort of murder mystery novel or movie. And that is some place where he's very clearly very comfortable. And so it's really interesting to think, and it was an independent film, but again, it cost millions of dollars to make. Filmmakers are working on a slightly different scale of money than we are when it comes to publishing, even though self-publishing is very expensive, or it can be very expensive. He's a really interesting creator and writer to look at when it comes to career arcs and what the fruits of your labors can be, because Netflix bought the second 2 Knives Out movies for $500 million.
Yeah, that's a significant a lot of money, like a lot.
It's huge. And both, so apparently I was like kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it yesterday while I was researching, but Rian Johnson, Daniel Craig, and Rian Johnson's producing partner apparently each took home over $100 million for the second 2 Knives Out movies.
That is insane. Like, I don't even know what I'd do with that much money.
No, no, it's just like a clearly just like otherworldly amount of money, which is very odd because I feel like Glass Onion, and that wasn't production, like they bought the rights for $100 million, or, they got that amount of money for the rights to the 2 movies. And I don't think that included like production budgets. So, Glass Onion is such a visually interesting movie. And normally when you think, one of my favorite things about it is that normally when you think murder mysteries, you think something like the first Knives Out movie, which is like this really sort of like gothic, dark, New Englandy, old money, aesthetic, or you think something along the lines of Peaky Blinders, where it's like foggy city streets, dark alleys and things like that. And my favorite thing about Glass Onion is that it takes place on an island in Greece, and it's nothing but bright sunlight, no shadows, no clouds. And I was wondering, like, did it kind of like catch you off guard with this sort of aesthetic that he was working with?
Honestly, for me, I actually really liked that, the filmography of it or whatever the term is. But yeah, the
The cinematography of it, yeah.
cinematography, yes, that's it. I think it lended itself well because it's like the movie, how can I put it, balanced tones. Like it's obviously a murder mystery, but it was also really funny at points.
Yeah. And you know, and I think the other thing that really kind of caught people off guard, especially compared to the first Knives Out movie, which was again very like New Englandy, old money, this one established family, even though like obviously there's such like a class and racial component to the first Knives Out. But the second one is, the cast is way more diverse, which I really, really appreciated, because when you go back to the old Agatha Christie novels, it's almost exclusively like stiff upper lip, rich white British people. And I saw some people kind of going, oh, the diversity of Glass Onion I felt was really forced. And I didn't find it really forced at all.
No, I don't think it was forced at all. I mean, we live in a very diverse country. I mean, I think it was just a sample size of what America looks like. I mean, so I don't think it was forced at all, in my opinion. So that's
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. And I was really unfamiliar with Janelle Monáe's acting
Mhm.
before she was in this movie. And she was just absolutely incredible. Like,
Yeah, I have to feel like that entire cast killed it. Dave Bautista, in my opinion, is a better actor than what he gets credit for.
no lie. He's so good in this movie. I think, I know that in the past when he was in Guardians of the Galaxy, that is a very sort of like direct, acting job for him. And I think it's really important because a lot of people with Guardians of the Galaxy and Drax, like I saw a lot of people talking about like how the character reminded them of being autistic and, and just sort of taking everything very literally. And I thought that was a really interesting read on the character. But this, and again, knowing Dave Bautista's like politics and his own personal, leanings towards things, he's a super lefty, like really cool guy. And for him to play this big, like meathead men's rights
Mhm.
activist, I
Uh,
thought was just a really, really interesting casting. Like what the politics at play in this movie they're very like bald faced, like they don't lie
mhm.
about what the politics are, which I think is really interesting for a murder mystery, because normally murder mysteries are about secrets.
I love the way that like this feels like just a callback to Agatha Christie. This feels like an Agatha Christie story, but with modern sensibilities. Like I loved him as a right wing influencer, and I also love the part where where he's streaming and then we realize, oh, he's in his mom's basement. Like I feel like that truly encapsulates like part of this like movement, like that trope of like these guys shit posting from their mom's house or their parents' house. Like I found that so funny.
Yeah. And I love that like his mom solves the puzzle for him. Like
Uh,
he doesn't
yeah.
it's so good. But he still has like it's funny because he still has like the trappings of like the hot blonde girlfriend. And I
Mhm.
just love that sort of playing with power and who has access to power and things like that. Because another one of my favorite characters in the movie, again, it's not a huge cast, but there's more people than you expect there to be. Is Catherine Hahn's character, where she's playing like the governor of my home state of Connecticut, and I think she does it really, really well, and it understands the politics of that sort of, we mean to do well, but we're going to do it by like looking down our nose at you. Where
Yeah.
she's kind of a bitch the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, especially towards, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name. She's a supermodel, but she's kind of ditzy.
Birdie, yeah,
Yes.
Kate Hudson's character.
Yes, Kate Hudson's character. Like she was mean to her the entire movie, I feel like.
I like the conceit that they're all best friends, and it's
Mhm.
like they hate each other so much.
I kind of really like that dynamic because it also kind of shows how the billionaire guy kind of all had them by the balls pretty much because they all relied on him. So that kind of forced them to kind of have to like stay together to some weird extent because they all
Yeah,
had to suck up to him because in various ways he's funding their lives.
absolutely. I like, so the introduction of Benoit Blanc into this group of characters, you can tell that they're all so uncomfortable. They have no idea why he's there. They have no idea who he is. And I think one of the things that, again, Agatha does so well in all of her books is, because Benoit Blanc is someone I would love to be friends with. He's so smooth. He's so debonair. He's so, he has that movie star charisma because he's
Mm,
Daniel Craig. That,
mm,
like, if you're not a bad person, you're going to be drawn to his sense of
yes.
confidence and his sense of power. And I think it's really interesting for Rian Johnson to have made Benoit Blanc this really charismatic,
Mm.
interesting, magnetic guy, when a lot of Agatha Christie's sleuth characters like Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot are really off-putting people that no one really wants to be around.
They are, and I feel like Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, like he really like enhances that movie because there's like I feel as though at least there's these like PI tropes of just being so down and dour and just like, oh, my past trauma informs who I am now. Whereas like with Benoit Blanc, him being kind of like quirky and upbeat and charismatic enhances the movie. Like it helps with this tone of like how it's a murder mystery, but it's also kind of fun to watch.
Have you spent a lot of time reading things like The Maltese Falcon, with like the Sam Spade novels or the Philip Marlowe novels, where like the big famous noir detectives from sort of like post World War One, post World War Two?
I never got into the Maltese Falcon, but I did read the Philip Marlowe books. But one thing is, oh my God, Teddy, sorry.
He's fine. Don't worry. He's so cute.
But one thing about those books is that they are confusing as hell. Like,
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like there's just so much, but like, there's something about Raymond Chandler's writing style that I really like. So that carries me through to the end. And they're not very long books either, in my opinion. So it's like, I kind of put up with the confusingness of the plot, but like he layers plot point over plot point. And if you forget something, you're like, where the hell did this come into play?
Yes. Like they are really confusing. I'm trying to think of The Long Goodbye, which is, I think, is one of Robert Altman's like best movies. It's the one with Elliot Gould playing Philip Marlowe. And it's really, really, really good. And it's very 1970s, but it does a really good job of streamlining that book because you're right. Like they're unbelievably confusing. They will mention people by the first name in like one sentence, and then they bring them up like 40 pages later. And you're never like, I never have any idea who anybody is. Everybody's on drugs all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and the PI is half the time too, where you're just kind of like, I get you were passed out drunk, but like, I didn't glean anything from that chapter.
Yeah, no, like I remember I made the mistake of putting down one of Raymond Chandler's books for like a week or two because I had, life was lifing. I had stuff going on. And then picked it up like 2 weeks later and I was like, I have no idea what's going on.
You have to start all over. But they are really depressing. Like Philip Marlowe and Sam Spade are deeply messed up. And, a lot of noir is just like, oh, I was in World War One and now I have mental health issues that the people of my generation have no concept of, and nothing is going to treat it except for bourbon. And like, it's really an interesting like time and like capsule of time for things. But we did really get caught up for a very long time that every PI, every sleuth, every mystery has to be about like your own personal demons.
Mm.
And I like that to an extent. Like, I really, really like those books. But I love the fact that Benoit Blanc has no demons. He is just, he's just a guy who's going to find the answer. And it's really refreshing that we have this generation of sleuths that are allowed to care about other people as opposed to do everything through like being jaded and angry.
This series, I didn't even begin this series yet, but Benoit Blanc actually inspired a character that I do want to write about one day. This would be a horror mystery novel. Like it's solving more murders, but with ghosts involved and stuff like that.
I need
And
this.
like, yeah, and I do, because like I do write a lot about trauma in my work, even in my like sci-fi stuff that I publish with magazines. And there's a part of me that's like, I feel like there's more to life than just straight up trauma. Like not everybody's informed by their past trauma. So I want a character that's like, he had a normal childhood. Like Like some people do have normal childhoods, and like that did inspire this like detective that can see the dead and whatnot that I do want to write about one day.
I'm so excited about this. That sounds really really fun. I feel like there's been a lot of crossover in genre fiction lately. Like this huge bestseller that just went absolutely banana pants like earlier this year was like a romance mystery, like a romance whodunit. And it read very nice. It also took place in LA. So I was like, oh, let's see what they're talking about because it was fun to see that. But I thought that was a really interesting, different dynamic to that. And now I think horror mystery is going to be a huge thing in a couple of years. So please write that right now because I think it's going to be really, really exciting.
Mhm.
But I feel like at first, when I first saw that they were casting Daniel Craig to be a sleuth,
Mhm.
and it's one of those things where you're like, good, a handsome man is going to be the lead of a movie. Ooh, groundbreaking. But
Mhm.
I think ever since he retired from Bond, Daniel Craig has always chosen. I don't think he's played heterosexual in a movie since he left Bond, which is a really interesting choice for him.
Mhm.
And I think it's also really interesting that Rian Johnson, who's married to Karina Longworth, who's really, really cool. And, she's just a fantastic human being. I wonder how you feel about explicitly making Benoit Blanc gay in the second movie.
That kind of also just tears down this archetype of the machismo PI, like the gruff, like, "Oh, I drank all the time and I'm so sad," like archetype that has existed in mystery for so long. Like, I really genuinely like the fact that Benoit Blanc is the complete opposite of all of that. Like, he's just so charming and like, it's just, he really does like make every scene.
It really does. Part of like the womanizing aspect of a lot of different like sort of mid-century PIs is they drink, they womanize, they get into bar fights, they fight with the cops, and you're just kind of like the self-destructive bent is interesting, but I can't imagine that it lends itself to crime, like good crime fighting in any way. You know what I mean? Like to me, this is a very, again, the way that I write is that the person, they can have emotions about things, but figuring out a murder mystery is a very Poirot sort of, all I need is my brain in order to sit and think about how these things go together. And I always thought it was really interesting that we got into the mode that like, no, a barroom fight is going to solve this mystery. And it's like, a barroom fight is not going to solve a mystery. It's just not.
Yeah, like when I was younger and I started getting into mystery fiction, I kind of liked that entire, like what you're talking about, like the barroom fight scenes, the self-destructive nature. But the older I get, I kind of really like the more what's what I'm looking for? People just using their brains. Like people just, like kind of like Hercule Poirot or like Benoit Blanc. Like I don't know, I guess probably because I was in my early 20s and I liked shit like that, like just the violence of it all. But like I actually appreciate it now that I'm older, people being able to think their way through things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think that media informs people's actions to the same extent that, like, when I grew up in the 90s, where like Al Gore's wife was like, oh my gosh, if you listen to music with swear words, you're going to end up being like this horrible person. And I don't think that, or video games is the reason why everything is happening. Like, obviously, I grew up with enough of that messaging to know that that's false. But
Mm.
I do really like, Rian Johnson's characterization of these people in that, especially with Glass Onion, it's a lot of what's happening is because people are really fucking dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Like definitely one thing Ryan Johnson did that I appreciated this time around that I didn't really catch the first time is that he really did add some nuance to the character of Duke's girlfriend, Whiskey.
Yeah.
She started off kind of like what's the word? How can I put this? This ditzy girlfriend blonde archetype, but then as she went on, you start to realize, oh, this is actually a very nuanced character. And
Yeah.
it's, and then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, where I was like, okay, this is actually a lot more nuanced character than I remember.
Yeah, I think her character and the assistant character to Birdie, whose name I'm forgetting off the top of my head, I'm going to look that up. Peg, who's Birdie's assistant. Like, because, we have, again, another sort of thing that happens a lot notoriously in Agatha Christie novels is that you have the divide between upstairs and downstairs. You've got the
Yeah.
lords and ladies walking around upstairs, and then you've got the maids and the cooks and the butlers downstairs. And the maids and the cooks and the butlers, they see more than, and every, mustache twirling sort of sleuth is like, I know, I'm going to go talk to the maid because she's going to have all these secrets. And it's like, yeah, that's not novel. We all kind of know that by a certain point. But when you put them on a high-tech island where, where downstairs has been sort of taken over by Alexa, essentially, I really like the fact that the people with servants, they don't see their servants as servants. And I think that that's a really interesting thing he did with this, because these are the type of terrible people who truly believe that they don't live in a society with class anymore. They don't see like, well, because she is not wearing a black and white uniform with a little, apron on, she's not my maid. And I think that that was a really smart thing for
Yeah.
Rian Johnson to sort of pull front and center.
I definitely agree with that. And yeah, you're exactly right about how Agatha Christie portrayed class in her books. Like, yeah, I never thought about it that way. Like, I always knew it was there subconsciously. But yeah, there definitely was that upstairs, downstairs divide. Whereas, like, it seemed like, Birdie and Peg were somewhat friends. Like, even though, like, Peg was her assistant. So I'd
Yeah.
really did appreciate that. Like, he really did truly just, I know I probably keep talking about Agatha Christie, but I love her work so much. He really did enhance a lot of the tropes that she started, but for modern sensibilities, like it really, yeah, I love his series, the Knives Out series.
Yeah. Like, I was someone's personal assistant when I was in my 20s, and it
Mm.
was the weirdest experience, like working experience I've ever had, because like he was a wine critic, and so I would go and pick up like his prescriptions and his dry cleaning and stuff like that, and his wife would send me on errands all the time. But like I was also his ghostwriter, so if he had a daily radio show on like major radio networks in LA and New York City. And then I also, like, one day he just declared, it was like, oh, we're going to have a 2 hour internationally syndicated radio show about like fine food and wine and things like that, and you're going to be my producer. But I was still also expected to like pick up his prescriptions and like run errands for him. And so it's this really weird balance that you have where it's like I was asked to shuttle him to events all the time, and like I had to like watch his grandkids and like take care of the dog, and you're treated sort of like don't be shown. But then like when they need you to care about their own personal lives, then all of a sudden you're a friend and you have to listen and things like that. And it's a really uncomfortable dynamic when you know that like if they weren't paying you $30,000 a year, like, you would not give a rat's ass about these people. And I feel like Rian Johnson really captures that sort of, I realize I'm getting to do things. I have access to things by being this person's assistant. But if they were not paying me, I would be happier and not here. And it would be way better if I wasn't here.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a question for you. So you said you were a ghostwriter for this guy as well.
Yeah. I wrote a lot of articles for his magazine and things like that as well.
It's like, what is that process like? Did he provide feedback, or were you able to, like, sorry if I'm derailing the conversation.
No, it's fine. No, it was a free for all, like truthfully. Like I had a little bit of experience prior to working for him, but it was just sort of like you're going to do these things to the best of your ability. Essentially whatever I wrote, he was just like fantastic and slapped his name on it and it was fine. So, I learned a lot doing that, but at the same time, it was very bizarre to sort of never get feedback, to never really, I don't know, it made making a podcast really easy, because once you have a deadline, and this is something that I think a lot of writers struggle with, is that once you have a deadline, you become a much better writer. And so like there's no time to sit and think and get lost in your thoughts and get lost in your panic and things like that. So, There were certainly shows that I did that were way better than others, but you always hit a certain level of quality when you have to do the same thing every single day or every single week. And you have to make sure that every Saturday morning I had to have a show ready to go. And I was only one person. Other radio shows have staffs of like 5 people, and I was one person, scheduling the interviews, editing the interviews, writing, 10 minutes of chat, or like monologues that he would write and stuff like that. It was a 2-hour show. And so it was like, yeah, that had to happen. And so you just get really good at it. And I think that's not enough people who are writers, in even fiction writers, give themselves hard enough deadlines.
Yeah, I really agree with the whole deadlines thing. Well, first of all, that sounds very hardcore that you were able to do all that by yourself. I don't want to like bypass that at all. I probably would have crumbled under all that pressure if I'm being real with you. But
Thank you. It wasn't fun.
yeah, I imagine not. Geez, but yeah, I do agree with the whole deadlines thing because I'm also a journalist, and one thing that, in my opinion, that you don't want to do is to constantly tell your editor like, "Okay, I'm gonna need an extension. Okay, I'm gonna need an extension. I need another extension." And I write for mainly a monthly magazine, and just the way that the nature of the publishing works is that if a story, so I pretty much have to plan my stories out like 6 weeks in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I have a story that needs to be out in September. I got to start planning that shit in July so I can have it to the press so it can be printed out in mid-August. So like that deadline actually helped me become a better fiction writer too, because now I was able to like put, what's what I'm looking for? Once I had limits put on me, like a deadline put on me, I was able to then put it on myself because it forces you to not think about it too much. Like I remember my first deadline for the first like big magazine that I wrote for was BuzzFeed News.
Ooh.
On a Wednesday. They accepted my story on a Friday. And then they told me, can you have this in on Monday? And I was like, holy shit. Okay, I have. So like I sat there churning out word after word. In total, it was about 2,000 words, but I probably wrote 8,000 because I kept starting over and I just slapped with work together. And I was like, okay, this is my story. I hope you
Yeah,
like it. I mean,
exactly. This is the best I could. My husband used to work for, my husband's a composer for film, and he used to work for another composer. And my favorite bit of advice that I ever got that came from this man was, nobody cares what you can do. They care what you can do in 2 hours. And I think that that is like the most wonderful advice about working in a creative field. It's just like, everyone has a modicum of genius in them somewhere, about what they can create and what they can do. Whether or not you can work on a deadline is an entirely different thing.
yeah, yeah, those deadlines could be killer. But I've learned to appreciate them because it also gets me to turn off my internal editor. Like,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a while now, like taking writing seriously as something I want to do full time as a career. And for me, a deadline is no better way. Like, there's no way better than a deadline to help you shut down that internal critic because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like, you have to get it done.
Totally. No, and you know what? I'm going to bring this around because it's going to be really, I hope this makes sense. But one of the things that I think Rian Johnson does exceptionally well in all of these movies is that he does create constraints really, really well for all of his things. And so Knives Out, you knew that the murderer had to be in the family because it was all
Mhm.
about the family, and it all has to be about these horrible, selfish, self-centered people. And I think one of the things that's really great about Glass Onion is that he made the very specific point of having it be on an island. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I have grasped onto. Have you watched Widow's Bay yet? The show on fantastic, and there's a line in it, and it's sort of like a comedy horror mystery thing.
Mhm.
Really, really good, like overlapping of genres. And at some point, the mayor goes like, you have to put up a perimeter. He's trying to tell the police chief, you have to put up a perimeter. And the police chief goes, there is a perimeter. We're on an island. And I think that the wonderful play that Rian Johnson does in Glass Island or Glass Onion is that you think that everything is what it is because it's specific people are invited to an island. And he does so well at finding weak spots in the constraints that he's put upon himself. by, it seems a little cheap, but having Andy or Janelle Monáe's character be an identical twin
Mhm.
is, he kind of, I was reading an interview with him and he was like, I hate that I kind of wrote myself into that corner, but it does work really, really well in this
It does.
because that is the weakness in the wall.
I really liked the twin twist. Jesus, I think it did work very well because, like, I mean, as a fellow writer, like sometimes you do write yourself into these like walls.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure some people didn't appreciate it, the twin twist, but I liked it. Like this time around, I not only watched it for the film for enjoyment, I watched it for the craft aspects as well. Because mystery fiction in some ways also does work like sci-fi and fantasy. Because like once you get into genre, you have to set rules. If
Yeah.
not, nothing you does like will make sense to the reader. And if anything can happen, that loses the stakes. And like
Yeah.
I like that like all the puzzle pieces he put there were right there in that room in the constraints that he built. And yeah, I mean, yeah, he did use a loophole to write himself out of that constraint that he put himself in. But again, it works, especially with the twist being that she wasn't actually killed. The whole hot sauce scene where he puts hot sauce on her and like when they're outside the house.
Yeah. 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 That's
Yeah.
so
So
smart.
I think, yeah, to me, I think the layering of those twists and the constraints you're talking about, like it worked very well for me. I did also read some reviews of the movie online because I was just trying to see what other people were saying about it in preparation for this. There were some people that did not appreciate that, but people are haters.
Yeah, exactly. No, what's really interesting to go back to something we were chatting about 3 minutes ago is almost everybody that I've spoken to for this show. And I'm wondering why, and I don't have an answer for this. Most of us have at least an editorial or journalist background. And I wonder what you might think it is that all of us who have crafted, stories that go out to the public or radio shows, in my case, that went out to the public, why we seem to like crime fiction so much.
Honestly, I never really thought about that. That actually is a good question.
Yeah. Like, I wonder if it's the hook aspect of it. Like, when you're writing a piece that goes out and you're like, so when I was in college, I had this professor. I took a class in magazine writing.
Hmm.
And I had this professor, and she was my favorite professor ever. And whenever I tell people the story of what she used to do to us in class, they're like, this woman was your favorite. And I was like, yes, she was. Where we had to pitch her stories like she was the editor of our magazine. And we would come up with a pitch, and she would sit there and scream at you, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I don't care about this story. I don't care about this story yet. I don't care. I don't care. And you had to, on the fly, change the pitch of what you were telling her for the story that you wanted to write until you found the hook of the story. And she'd be like, that's your story. Go and write it. And so we would have to, and she would sit there, and she always wore bright red lipstick and it smeared all over her teeth. And she was just like the most interesting older woman I've ever met in my life. And she had a cane and she'd shake it at you. It was great. And I loved her class because she always got me to find the hook. She really trained my brain to figure out like what someone was going to give a damn about in the story that I was writing. And I think that crime fiction works really well if you're really good at finding the soul of a story. You know what I mean?
I can see why that person was your favorite teacher, in my opinion, because I have an editor I work with. Her name's Holly. She works at Anti-Gravity magazine, and she's really like that with me. Like she really did help me become a better journalist because I'll send in a draft and it'll just be red ink. Well, we're in Google Docs, but
Yeah.
figurative red ink over everything. And she's like, Danny, what is this story about? Like, you're almost there. And then, like, it's not like she would give me the answer. And, like, there was one story where she almost broke me, but the story was, like, better for it. So, anyway, I like that type of editing where it's almost like you were with a physical trainer and so somebody that wants you to be the best that you can be. But,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still
Yeah.
thinking about that question of why journalists are drawn to crime fiction. That really is a good question that I've never thought about before.
Yeah, because I've never done investigative journalism. I've always just written about like lifestyle stuff. It's like, oh, this new wine is coming out, this restaurant is opening, stuff like that. And you have to get But my friend Keith, who's been on the show multiple times, he was a straight up like investigative journalist in Indiana, and he was like, yeah, that trope of like a journalist sitting in the car, like waiting for someone to get in the car and like give him information. He's like, yeah, we actually did that in the 70s and 80s. And I'm like, I could never do that. That would scare the living shit out of me. But like, there is something about like wanting to write for people and just like, and get into their brains and figuring out like how to sort of, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but it is manipulation to get people to care about something, because I'm really fascinated by why we care about murder mysteries and why, the social justice aspect of it. Because one of my favorite things about cozy mysteries, which this sort of is, and private investigators, is how the people in the characters in the story decide who gets justice and why. And I think what's really fascinating about Glass Onion at the end is all these people are committed to being reprehensible. They're like, this man is terrible. He's killed someone we supposedly cared about. But he's got all the money, so we're going to have to continue to kiss his ass. And within a matter of minutes, Rian Johnson explosively blows that up and then all of a sudden shows them having a change of heart. And you hate them for it a little bit, but you understand that the second he doesn't have money, they're happy to drop him like a hot rock and walk away. And it's so incisive into like personal, politics and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that might be part of why, like, a lot of journalists may be like drawn to crime fiction the more I think about it. Because, okay, so I'll use myself as an example as to not talk about all crime writers.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm drawn to crime fiction is because I feel as though that's like if there's a Venn diagram, crime fiction would be in the middle, and then there's politics, there's classism, there's race. Like, there's a lot of politics in my first book, The Pike Boys, and I was able to apply context for people listening. I'm a political journalist. That's the type of journalism I do. I was able to put all of my knowledge about politics, about classism, social, political stuff into that book in a way that I just would not be able to in sci-fi and fantasy. I hope I didn't piss off anyone that likes sci-fi and fantasy. I'm sure that you can do classism and racism and that stuff too. But anyway, yeah, I feel like it lends itself better than to crime fiction.
And I think that's one of the secrets that we get to keep in our back pocket when it comes to writing crime fiction, is that like you get to make the villain villainous for more complicated reasons than just like he's the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely get that. Yeah, I'm trying to think because I've also gotten like bad reviews for my book, and the criticism is the fact that I do focus so much on the social political stuff and the like character development instead of like, you know, I think some people expected it to just be like all rum running and bootlegging and like people getting shot at, which that's in there, but that's not what I wanted it to just be about. Like, yeah, I've had similar reviews.
They're really fun and educational because I know there's been like a huge upswing of people, again, like across threads, especially is where I've seen it, where people have read their bad reviews and then they attack the reviewer. And one of the things that I think Rian Johnson does really, really, really well that I like to emulate in a professional life is that, he gets so much unearned shit because of what he did with Star Wars, and people really expected a different kind of story out of him. And granted, it's a lot easier to do when you have $100 million check in your back pocket, but he's just like, nope, I'm going to write what I'm going to write and screw you if you don't like it. And that's just like, it's a really good takeaway. Granted, I also wouldn't give a ass about what anybody thought of me if someone handed me $100 million check.
Mm-hmm.
But, it is something to keep in mind as you go forward, which is, he's always been this guy. He's always, written in the same genre. He's always been really, really fascinated with, what victims get looked into, like his first movie, Brick, if I recall correctly, it's like a teenage girl gets murdered and everybody just kind of goes like, well, she deserved it because, she was kind of like a slutty teenage girl. And he really gets people into the like, no, she didn't deserve whatever happened to her because, teenage girls are also people and their murders should probably be investigated. And like, he gets really into, like giving people humanity in a like that's my favorite thing about crime fiction, and especially PI fiction, was like you get to give people the humanity that the rest of the world doesn't want to give them.
That is very true. Yeah, I feel like crime fiction can be a window into someone's soul. It can be a magnifying glass on society. And there's this quote that Dennis Lehane once said. He said something to the effect of that, like Shakespeare or, those type of plays is about people falling from the greatest heights, whereas crime fiction can be about someone falling from the curb. Like, as in, like, you can zoom in on people and their everyday issues, if that makes sense.
I'm going to be thinking about that for a little while because no, it's so true. Like, I like to. A lot of people think about crime fiction through the lens of like puzzling and putting, and I did an episode on Sherlock Holmes with Katie Watson earlier this year or earlier in the season. And she was like, oh, British people, we like setting everything back to rights. You like setting everything back into order. And I feel like American crime fiction is slightly different because America doesn't have the same adherence essentially to social order. Like, obviously we got one, but like it's a slightly more malleable, especially depending on where you live, concept of what is order and what is disorder. And I think that one of the things that Rian Johnson does really well in his movies is that setting things back to rights is not giving people their money back, or letting Miles Braun, or who's like Ed Norton, who's absolutely brilliant in that movie, which, we'll just say that he's absolutely brilliant, but like, it's not letting him continue down the pathway that he has. Like, setting things back to rights might be taking things away from people. And that's like something Rian Johnson does really, really well in these movies.
And one thing I appreciated about this ending of Glass Onion, spoiler alert, I mean, but the movie's been out for 4 years at this point, is that it wasn't just a straight up like Benoit Blanc, going around explaining the crime to everyone like it would be an Agatha Christie novel, where Poirot will spend like 30 pages explaining the murder to the suspects. I like that it was a deconstruction to some extent of Miles Braun's ego. Like, just slowly, like, I mean, yeah, he does eventually get arrested, or it's implied he does, but I like the fact that they started tearing his shit up, that they blew up his literal glass onion. Like, I feel as though that was a more affecting ending because these billionaires, they get away with murder in some way, literal cases. But anyway, moving past that. And if he would have been arrested, in my mind at least, I would be thinking to myself, like, okay, he's going to get some good lawyers and get out of this shit. But no, along the way, the characters, they're tearing up his house. They get rid of the clear, that power resource that he's working so hard on. They're attacking his ego. And that's what those people care about. They care about their ego. And to me, that's what hurts them more than going to jail. And I feel as though like that was more affecting.
Yeah. No, you're so right. Like, yeah, no, like he's really good at finding like the incisive attack that's going to take someone down. You're right. Like, there's nothing left for Miles Braun to steal from someone else. So he's finished. And that's such a really brilliant way to wrap him up. And again, everybody in this movie really delivered just like phenomenal performances. We talked about Janelle Monáe, we talked about Catherine Hahn, we talked about Dave Bautista, who's great in everything. But like, I think it was a really interesting choice to grab Ed Norton for this character because he's had such a widely varied career, whereas like a lot of the times we think about him in really, really, really serious stuff, like I'm thinking like he was like what was it, American History X when I was in high school, and that's just like an earth-shattering like concept, or earth-shattering movie. And you've got Fight Club and stuff like that. But one of the movies that kept coming up when I was reading Rian Johnson interviews about why he wanted to hire Ed Norton is this really weird movie called Death to Smoochie. And it's a very funny, like dark comedy. And it's got Robin Williams in it and it's super fucking weird. And I think having Ed Norton, who's considered like a very serious actor, do something this buffoonishly large is really insightful casting on Rian Johnson's part.
Knives Out franchise movies are always so well casted. Like, and he does kill it as like the douchebag, Edward Norton I'm talking to, the douchebag billionaire.
Yeah.
Like, he really delivered on it. Like, feel like I was watching Mark Zuckerberg and how these other tech billionaires actually act, where they're like, think they're saying something profound, but they're really not. Like the scene I'm thinking of is whenever he's going on a rant about them all being disruptors. And another quote I'm about to butcher, where Benoit Blanc is saying, speaking without thought is not speaking. Shit, what'd he say?
Speaking truth. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, just, I really love this movie, is a
Yeah.
part of it, but yeah.
No, thank you so much for getting me to rewatch it because, I rewatched Knives Out and I really, really loved it for like earlier this year. And then, I remember not really connecting with Glass Onion to the same extent because partially it's because like Knives Out takes place in a place that I'm really, really familiar with. And so I was like, oh, it feels very like homey and comfortable, but fantastical at the same time. And I remember not really connecting with Glass Onion to the same extent, but I think it's a movie that has aged phenomenally well.
It's aged wonderfully. I'm not crazy about the third one in the Knives Out movie. I'll have to rewatch that one. Maybe on a third rewatch, I'll, like it, or a second
Yeah,
rewatch. I mean, anyway, but yeah, one thing I really appreciated about Glass Onion is that even though Benoit Blanc is the central character, he's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? The anchor to which everything else is tied. Like, it's almost like he provides us, a glimpse at the ensemble cast, if that makes any sense at all. Like, it's not
totally.
just him. It's like
Yeah.
he allows us a window into the lives of these people. Because as he's snooping around, we're getting to learn a lot about who these people are, like the rest of the cast.
It's so good. Thank you so much for suggesting this movie. I really, really appreciate it. Danny, how can everybody keep in touch with you and your work?
I am so online. I'm trying to narrow it down to where I'm on so many. So I started a second TikTok this week. It's TikTok account. Like, it's a problem. But the places where I actually interact with people are Instagram and Blue Sky at D Cherry Writer. That's DEE Cherry, like my last name, and then Writer, like what I do, or who I am. And I do have a second book coming out next year. Just to plug that,
Wonderful.
almost forgot about that. And if you want to be, up to date on stuff related to my books in general or my short fiction, you can sign up at bigeasypress.beehive.com. And it's Beehive spelled like BEEHIIV.
Okay.
Yeah, it kills me when these tech companies try to put spin on words. Like,
Why did they do that?
it killed me.
It's just
It's
killing
like,
everybody.
but yeah, that's of it. That's everything I got.